Welcome back to Architectural Adventures brought to you by Historic Springfield Society. I'm your host, Kylie. Thanks for joining me as we tour Springfield's architectural curiosities. And today we have a special episode because we are coming to you from the Drewseum in honor of spooky season. And I have my very special guest, my dear friend Drew Hunter, here with us. Thank you so much for joining us, Drew.
Welcome to the Drewseum.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Of course.
So in honor of spooky season, we thought that it would be fun to talk about some of the stories in Springfield that you've experienced,
Right.
some things that I've experienced. So who better to share those with than Drew?
Well, I appreciate that. This is a great opportunity because Springfield, being the historic district it is full of tales of all kinds. And now that the haunting season is upon us, it's time to tell a few. So I really appreciate you asking, reaching out and such. So I have always been intrigued with what many people call the paranormal. Some people call it the supernatural. I don't believe in the supernatural. I believe whatever happens is natural. We just don't understand it yet. I've always been intrigued with that, and I've always been very sensitive to this sort of thing. Coming into a home, being able to sense what some people may not be able to sense right away. Some people are more attuned to this sort of thing than others. So with that in mind, let's tell some stories.
So being in historic Springfield, our homes over the years, I feel, have lived many lives.
Right.
And they've collected so much energy over the years. In fact, I think I mentioned to you, one of my fears when I first got my house was that it was going to be haunted.
Mm-hmm.
But thankfully, sensitive people that have walked through, because I have never been as sensitive or attuned to it as you have. And other people have comforted me in the fact that no, there's some positive energy, but there's nothing spiritual there.
Right.
Which has made me feel a little bit better.
Well, you're absolutely right. All houses have an energy.
Mm-hmm.
Energy has to go somewhere. And I know that when I bought the house I'm in now, it had this remarkable energy. It's one of the things that attracted me to it. And it has proved, this house has proved to be my friend. And we had a very good understanding when I first moved in. I've been in this house now almost 10 years, and I love it. And the energy is so good, is so strong.
I wholeheartedly understand that. I feel the exact same way about my house. I would always look at it, and they have such personalities. And when I would look at it, it would always look sad, like crying out for help.
Right.
So that's this house.
Yep.
I would really love to talk about the first house you lived in
Yes.
Springfield.
Yes.
And for privacy's sake, we are not going to be revealing exact addresses. So we're just going to give the general streets, and we'll leave some mystique up to the viewers as to which house it could possibly be. So we'll allow that mystery to continue.
Excellent.
But this first story is actually one of my favorites that you've shared, and it is called The Lady in Yellow. So Drew, I would love to hear about this.
The Lady in Yellow. Well, the house that my partner and I and our friend moved into in 2000 was on Laura Street. Well, a beautiful home. I had never at that time, before we moved in, I had never been above State Street. Never been above State Street. I'd heard about Springfield, but had never been up here. Well, when I was looking for a place to live, wanted to move closer. I've been living out toward the beach, wanted to move closer. A friend of mine at work said, hey, let's go look up in Springfield because I hear there's a lot of interesting homes up there. So one lunch, we came driving up here and we drove down. I didn't know where I was, but we drove down the street and I saw this beautiful home. And that evening, went to look at the house with my friends, with the person renting it. And the next day, leased the house and was at the house for 2.5 years. So, and it was a wonderful place. It had a great feeling to it, a great spirit to it. It had all been redone. It had all been restored, and we loved it. So we stayed in this house, as I said, about 2.5 years. Over that time, there were a few interesting things that happened. And this now as we're entering now into the haunt season, as you said, is a perfect time to talk about it. So one day, the same friend who I had found the house with came to the house to visit us one afternoon after work. Well, for some reason, the the we had to go outside. I left my friend inside. Myself, my partner, and my other friend went outside and left our guest inside. So my friend our guest was left alone in the living room, and he was looking at a book. He said, Drew, I was looking at a book, and all of a sudden, I looked up, and there was a woman standing in the foyer, looking out your front door. And I said, wait a minute. He says, there's no one else here, is there? and no. Again, we said no, and I said, wait a minute. You saw another person? He said, yes. She was standing at the front door, looking out as if she was looking for something. I said, okay, show us where she was. So we all march into the foyer, and we stand around the front door. And he says, okay, she was standing right here, looking out this way. I said, can you describe her? Well, she looked like she was in a late teens, 1918, 1919, 1920 yellow dress. And I said, can you tell me how old she was? Well, she didn't look that old. I really couldn't tell. I only saw her briefly. Then she was gone. So we're all gathered at the front door, all four of us, my friend is showing us where the lady was standing, as he remembered. And about that time, Gilgamesh, the cat, walked right in the middle of us. All of a sudden, right there, Gilgamesh stopped. The fur went up on Gilgamesh. The tail went up. Gilgamesh ran up the staircase, stood there looking through the banister with the tail flapping back and forth. And at that moment, I was wearing a brooch, much like I'm wearing here. The brooch I was wearing went off onto the floor, right in the middle of us. Fell off like, again, coincidence? Who knows? But it was really, really strange, right? So I think my partner Charles did a little bit of research as to who that might have been, but they came up with nothing. Who had lived here back in that era, but at that time could not find any information. So we don't know who that was or if it was. However, the following Halloween, we had a party. Gave a big, big party and a costume party in that house. Having a great time. Had a great turnout. Well, one of the people that came was another friend of mine from work. And she was an older lady, and she had hung around and had a lot of fun. She dressed up, a whole bit. Well, the next week at work, after the Halloween party, she came to my office and said, wow, Drew, that was a great party. And she had stayed late. She was one of the last people to leave. And she said, that was really nice. I met all sorts of nice people. Who was the lady in yellow? I didn't meet her. And I went, well, what lady in yellow? Well, she said, I was sitting in your living room. A lot of people were out back talking and on the back deck and in the kitchen, and no one else was around. I looked up and I saw a lady in a vintage dress standing by your front door, dressed in yellow, looking out the front door. And I went, really? Interesting. And she said, yeah. And then I got up, I put whatever she was doing, got up, and the lady was gone. I never saw her again. And I wanted to compliment her on her dress because it was so beautiful. I said, well, tell me about the dress. Oh, it was, late teens, 1918, 1920 vintage. And she was just standing there, but I never saw her again. Never saw her before at the party. I didn't see her after that. figured it was just maybe a late arrival or someone leaving. I don't know. So I said, well, I don't know either. And then I later told her about the other incident. And that lady never came back to my house. But I personally never saw this. I personally never saw this image. There were other manifestations in the house, but never saw that. And I have yet to explain how that happened.
Just makes you wonder.
Yeah, no
It
question.
makes you wonder if you were the guests in the house and she was a permanent resident.
Well, I feel that's very often the way it is.
Yes.
That whether you call them spirits or ghosts or some sort of other manifestation that we don't understand, I don't like to label it anything. I believe there's something that happens that we don't know what it is, but it does happen. It has happened all through history. And I believe that in certain places, usually and particularly older homes, such as that one and such as the one I'm in now, where there's been so much life, there's been so much life lived in these homes, that energy is captured somehow and is repeated, and sometimes and then with emotion, the emotions of family life and or traumas or whatever it may be that is somehow reenacted. We don't understand it, but I believe it's a perfectly natural occurrence. I don't think it's supernatural. We just don't understand it. For a long time, human beings didn't know what lightning was, right? And what the moon was, what the stars are. That has all become evident to us now. And the same thing will happen maybe someday with what we now call paranormal phenomena.
That story always gives me chills. And I think another perfect aspect of it is the fact that two different people corroborated the same details.
That's right, with absolutely no knowledge between. None.
Great story. Well, I have never experienced anything personally, but I have multiple stories from friends and family. So I have a very close friend who rented a home here in Springfield on Hubbard Street. And this home was your typical Springfield house. It looked like a normal sized house from the front, but it actually was quite large, and it was built as a duplex around 1904. So it originally had one unit upstairs, one unit downstairs, your typical Springfield duplex. And my friend told me that particularly downstairs, and especially in the back of the downstairs, like in the kitchen area, he always felt as if he was being watched or felt just unwelcome. And like he would be doing dishes or something, and just that feeling of being watched. So one night, it was late at night, probably around midnight, he was upstairs in bed, woke up in the middle of the night, and he had the sensation of someone sitting at the edge of the bed, as if someone had just sat down. And at this point, I told my friend if I had been you, I would have run screaming from that house and never returned. But he said that he was able to compartmentalize that and eventually went back to sleep because he had to get up for work in the morning.
Wow.
I don't see how he was able to do that.
Wow.
Now, I visited him many times in this house, and I have to say that I never had that feeling. But he was there obviously a lot more than I was. So
that's very interesting. That is, if you study your paranormal psychology and stories and such, that is a fairly frequent report of someone sitting on a bed or waking up and feeling that someone is watching you, and sometimes even having covers pulled down. or someone, you're asleep and you feel something at your feet, and you wake up and you may see a brief image of someone and then you're gone, and is this a dream or is this real? Yeah, they're just saying hello.
Yes, well, they could do it, I think, in a less frightening manner.
But they're not meant to be frightening. They don't think they're being frightening. They don't think they're trying. They're not trying to scare. There's in the whole history of ghosts, I don't believe there's anyone ever actually been hurt by a ghost. It's how we interpret it. We just don't understand it. As I said earlier, people were scared of lightning, thought it was from the gods. It was something, who knows what. It's lightning. Now, of course, lightning can hurt you, but there's never been any report that I've ever read, any serious report of anyone actually being harmed by what we might call a ghost.
Very true. And naturally, I think part of the fear factor, at least for me, is when these instances occur at night in the dark.
Yep.
So
that does add to it, doesn't it?
It does. It adds to the ambiance of the incident.
I always say, let's have it at night, and let's work up a big thunderstorm too.
So this next story, or this next two stories I want you to share, you were awoken in quite an interesting manner. So why don't you tell us about that?
Yes, this was again in the house on Laurel Street. And this particular phenomena, I did experience, and experienced it over the 2.5 years, probably 8 or 9 times. Oh, wow. Middle of the night, bedroom was upstairs, had the door shut, big old wooden door. The house, I believe that house was built around 1911 or so, I'm not sure. But it'd been around a long time. And in the middle of the night, sound asleep, there was what we call the thud. When I say the thud, I'm talking about BAM! On the wooden door right outside the bedroom. On our door. On the door. Enough to wake both of us up. And get up and make sure something hadn't fallen. What was that? Never anything. And we began just calling it that, the thud. You hear the thud last night? Yep, heard the thud again.
Now my question is, was there any visible damage on the door?
No.
Wow.
No, nothing. No marring wood, nothing. No.
Wow.
And what was interesting to me, what I always thought was kind of cool about that, if you remember the old 1963 movie, The Haunting, right? In that, where the two ladies are in the room and there's something banging on the door, and they tell their the doctor that's there, the psychologist, not the psychologist, but the paranormal expert about it, and he says, well, we were down the hall, we never heard a thing, and there's nothing there. The wood is not marred on the door. That's in that movie. This is the same thing. Same thing. Oh, and our housemate, who had the room down the hallway, never heard it.
Oh, that's even crazier.
Yeah, never heard it.
Wow.
Yep. Don't have an explanation for that, other than it happened.
And you also had a very similar incident in this very house where we're sitting, didn't you?
Correct. This was not long after I moved in. In my bedroom, I was getting ready to go to sleep. At that time, I had 3 cats, and the cats were all in the bedroom, and I had the door of the bedroom slightly ajar, the door being into the room a little bit. Outside the room, there's a staircase landing and the staircase going downstairs. So I lay down in bed, turn the light out, and BAM! Right outside the door. This time it didn't sound like it was on the door, but it sounded like something had fallen outside the door. And I sat up, and the door opened a little bit. Well, the cats didn't like this either. And they skedaddle out. Well, I got up just to see, is the house falling down? What's happening? There was nothing out there to fall. I knew that. But it was right there. It wasn't in the attic. It wasn't in my studio. It wasn't down the hall. It was right out. You could tell. Well, I went out, opened the door. One cat was sitting over to the side, all looking around, the hair up on end. One was down halfway down the staircase. The other one was on the landing of the staircase, down further, all looking up, going like this. I stepped out in the hallway, and that's when I had hair, it went. You know what that's called?
No, I don't.
Scientific term for that is horripilation. It's you horripilate.
What a great word.
You horripilate. Yes, when your hair stands on end due to cold or fright or something like that. When you get goosebumps and so on, you're horripilating. In case you ever need to use that word in casual conversation.
And see, we give it all to you on here. We just taught you a new word. Word of the day.
We'll have a pop quiz afterwards.
Yes.
So anyway, I'm standing out there, and I could feel it. You could feel the energy right there. Absolutely feel the energy. So I took a breath, looked around. Nothing was wrong. Nothing was amiss. And I looked at the cats, and they're going, Drew, what? And I went, hey, it's okay. It's nothing bad. It's something we don't understand. I told the cats this. It's all right. So the cats, all their fur went down and tails went down, and I went back to bed. That's the one and only time that's happened.
And you've never had any other experiences in this house?
No.
Wow.
No. Not that profound. Nothing.
Wow.
I mean, being the Drewseum, there is an atmosphere here.
Oh, yes.
So, but I like to think it's very welcoming. It's very peaceful. When I have guests over, it's always very, as I said, very welcoming, very, very calm and such. And that's how I like it. That's how I like it. So I think if there is anything in this house, it is at peace. I did talk to the house when I first moved in, right before I moved in, when the house was empty, before I had moved all my belongings in. One noon I came over from work and I stood up on the staircase and I said, house, I want to let you know that we're going to have a good time here. I'm going to fill the house with interesting and unusual things. We're going to have parties. We're going to have some music. It's going to be a house of peace and of creativity. And it was almost as if I could hear the house sigh. So that's my legacy with the house so far. Been here, as I said, almost 10 years.
That's wonderful. I love that story. That's great. So I have another story that I really want to share, which is a great story. And this comes from my brother, actually. And he and I share a love of paranormal and ghost stories, if you will. And we were both born in South Central Pennsylvania, a small town called Chambersburg. It's about 40 miles from Gettysburg. Our grandfather, who we called Paul because he couldn't pronounce grandpa when he was little, so he was always Paul to us. He was a big Civil War buff, so we would make frequent trips to Gettysburg. And it was about, the distance it would be to go to St. Augustine from here. It was very close. So we went there all the time. And this particular time, my brother, to his recollection, he was about 6 or 7 years old. This happened in the early 1990s, and it was summer, so it was still light outside, but it was dusk, so the sun was just beginning to set. They'd been in Gettysburg all day. They were near the car, and they were getting ready to leave. This area that they were in, it used to have an observation tower that you could climb so you could get a 360-degree view of the entire battlefield. And there was an old timber fence there that my brother liked to climb and play around with. So my grandfather was standing off on the side there. So they weren't standing together. My brother was playing around with the fence, and then he was out on the battlefield and in that vicinity. So my brother looks out towards the battlefield, And at this point, he had already been to a few Civil War reenactments. So he knew what the uniforms looked like. He knew what the soldiers looked like. He knew what a reenactment was. It was a pretty typical thing for him. So he became very confused when, straight ahead, he sees 3 soldiers in what he knows as Confederate uniforms, looking very haggard, staggering across the battlefield. And he had seen, the reenactments of the march and the very rigid demeanor. And these men looked like they had been beaten, and the clothing was tattered. They looked exhausted. And one of the 3 men was carrying a musket. Another one had a triangular hat. And the one with the hat actually made eye contact with my brother. And my brother to this day also thinks that he made eye contact with my grandfather, who was standing off to the side. Now, my grandfather never acknowledged him, but it terrified my brother. And to this day, my grandfather has since passed, but to this day, we don't know if he actually did see anything.
That's really, and what's fascinating about that to me is the detail of what he saw. I'm not sure I've ever heard a story of that nature where a manifestation looks someone in the eye. I'm not sure I've ever heard anyone really say that. That's fascinating. And the detail of knowing what type of weapons they were carrying and all that, that's fascinating.
And my brother even said to my grandfather, he said, "Is there a Civil War reenactment today?" And our grandfather was perplexed. He said, no. It was
right.
The sun was setting. It was just the 2 of them there, and it was years before I even heard this story. It really shook up my brother. He didn't know what to make of it, and just feeling unsure because he knows that our grandfather didn't see this, but he did. So there was that.
Right. Wow. That's something you don't forget.
No, definitely not. And he still remembers to this day. And so the last story that I want to share today is a very personal one. And I didn't experience it myself, but I wholeheartedly believe it. And it once again, it centers around my grandfather, and this time it involves my grandmother. And we were very close with both of them.
Yep.
Just wonderful people. My grandfather passed in 2019. And I had stayed with my grandmother for the week just to make sure that, she was going to be okay by herself and everything. And she was. She was a very strong woman, and she was doing okay. And after a week of me being there, she finally came to me, and she always called me Lover. She said, Lover, I appreciate you being here, but she said, you need to go home. And so I came back to Springfield, and the first night, now this is a week after my grandfather had passed, this was the first night that she was alone in the house that they lived in together. They lived outside of St. Augustine. She was alone, and she had this experience. Now, she told my mother, and my mother, I don't think, knew what to make of it. And then I was with her the following day, and I could tell she wanted to tell me something, but she was reluctant. And finally, she led with, I had something happen to me, and I don't want you to think I'm crazy. Now, context for who my grandmother was as a person. She was not a whimsical person at all. She was very right-brained, very pragmatic. She was a bookkeeper most of her life. So her mindset was all numbers. In fact, I don't even remember ever the 2 of us having a conversation about ghosts or paranormal. It just wasn't in her purview. So she told me, and my grandmother was also deaf. So she had a cochlear implant, and when she would take that out, she was completely deaf. So she was a light sleeper, though, and very light sensitive. So anytime my grandfather needed her help or needed to get her up in the middle of the night, he would turn on the light, and that would wake her up. She had to have the room in complete darkness when she slept. So she was asleep this first night. The light came on. She was still very groggy, and waking up. So she turns and she sees my grandfather standing there. Now she's still half asleep, so it doesn't register that he passed a week ago. And she remembers that he looked so good. He looked so healthy, because he really struggled health-wise near the end of his life. And she said that he just looked so good, like he used to. And one detail that I found quite humorous was, we called it his Christmas outfit. My grandfather had a set of clothes that every family picture every year. We don't know if he didn't remember he wore it every year or if it was just his favorite outfit.
Right.
But he had this set of clothes that he always wore every Christmas. So it was that outfit that he was wearing. And she said that he actually reached out and he like lightly stroked her arm. And my grandmother was still half asleep and she was quite irritated that she'd been woken up, and she forgot momentarily and she said, "What?" A little exasperated. And then she said he disappeared and the light went out. And that was it.
Interesting.
And she never saw him again after
Right.
that, never had another experience after
Saying
that.
goodbye.
Yeah, I
Saying goodbye.
wholeheartedly believe it.
Yeah.
I believe that was his way, because they were high school sweethearts.
Mm-hmm.
He always looked out for her. And I believe that was his way of saying, it's all right. Everything's all right.
Right. And there are so many theories, as we talked earlier, of what this is. Whether it's something that is generated in our own selves that we imagine and it seems so real, or whether there is really something there. But whatever it is a really interesting, magical occurrence. It's nothing to be frightened of. We don't understand all this. That's easy to say, sitting here in the daylight, right, with a camera on us and such. But late at night, when everything's dark and everything's quiet and something very strange happens, that's when the mystery really is unfolded. And what we call hauntings become not a theory, but reality. And it's something to recognize and to embrace, because it's part of life, part of death, part of life, whatever. Our existence, human existence. We don't understand it yet, but it's there. And I do believe that some people are more receptive than other people to this sort of thing. So, boo.
Well, Drew, we cannot thank you enough for joining us today.
My pleasure.
It's been my pleasure, truly. I've very much enjoyed just having a friendly chat and very interesting topic. So we hope that you all have enjoyed it as well. And we hope that you all have a safe and happy spooky season.
And happy Halloween.